In '84, my grandmother was going to get her hair done. She stopped by any salon that day and was sitting in the waiting room leafing through a magazine. Suddenly my grandmother felt that someone was watching her. When she looked up, she saw a child who looked exactly like my uncle. I mean like my uncle as a child, because he was already 25 years old at that time. This kid was sitting in the barber chair. He smiled and waved at her. She waved back and he sent her an air kiss. Grandma went back to reading the magazine, but she couldn't help thinking how much this child looked like my uncle, literally one and the same. Looking up again, she realized she was sitting all alone. There were no children in sight. Not an hour later, she received a call from the police department informing her that my uncle had been found dead at the scene of a car accident. Too scary story. The light coming from my closet. Growing up, we moved around a lot. We were also poor, so my parents usually rented the cheapest houses. I was probably 9 or 10 years old when we moved into that beautiful old house from the early 1900s. The house was in a very rough neighborhood, but trust me, that wasn't the worst part of the story. It happened one of the first nights after we moved in. I remember waking up and feeling ice cold. It was very strange because it was the middle of summer outside the window. Especially since we didn't have air conditioning and I wasn't allowed to open the windows at night. Then I noticed a soft blue light coming from my closet, so I turned around to examine it. There, in my open closet, was a girl about 30 years old sitting on some boxes. She was sitting there just crying. I could barely hear her, but what struck me the most was that she was blue too. Like the light that was coming from the closet. I remember sitting up, staring at her, and asking her what was wrong. She stopped, looked at me shocked, and after a few seconds, disappeared. I guess she didn't expect me to wake up or for me to talk to her. Anyway, that wasn't the last time I saw her, but I was never afraid of her either. When I turned 12, we moved. And we didn't live there very long at all. My mom wouldn't tell me for years why the rent was so low. There was a robbery there that killed a young girl and her mom. Seems like my parents were also dealing with the unexplainable, otherwise why did we leave there so quickly? 3 scary story. The bullet in the Bible. My elderly Uncle John had been sick for a long time. Knowing he was going to die, he started reading the Bible and tried to get his sister, my mom, back to church. He even sent her a Bible, which she immediately put aside, and eventually forgot about it. One day, my uncle had a big fight with his daughter and refused to call her back. At that time he was already in a lot of constant pain, but he was dying slowly. So he just took a bullet and ate it, trying to end his earthly journey sooner. To be honest, my uncle was going crazy by then. Meanwhile, at home, the Bible flew off the bookshelf. The same one my uncle was sending to my mom. It didn't just fall, it flew 6 meters down the hallway. In utter bewilderment, my mom and I picked up the book and put it back on the shelf. But at the same moment, before our eyes, it jumped out again and flew 5 meters away. Oh, how my mom and I were frightened. After standing there for a while in confusion, we put the book back in the same place. Nothing happened. We even sat on the couch waiting for it to fly away again, but nothing. To calm down, she and I went to the kitchen to make dinner. From there we heard a deafening noise and ran back into the living room. We found this Bible 12 feet away from the shelf. And this time it was lying open where my uncle had signed it. Mom looked at me and said, "I think John is dead." We called his wife and she confirmed that fact. At the same time the Bible was flying around our house. Kathy, Uncle's daughter, was receiving constant phone calls. They were clearly from her father. He repeated over and over again just one word, "I'm sorry." Katie's situation was much more tense, though, because the calls were still coming in for weeks after his death. And yes, my mom did start going to church again. 4 scary story. The woman in the white nightgown. When I was in 10th grade, I was lying in our unfinished basement watching TV late one night. I got up and walked to the unfinished basement bathroom, a concrete room with a toilet, sink and mirror. As I turned on the light, I saw a woman in a white nightgown in the mirror. Of course, I ran out of there in a flash. I never saw him again. Simply put, the scary stories ended there. But a year later, when I was home alone, my friend Ben came to pick me up. We were supposed to go Christmas shopping together. He had never been to my house before and had never met my parents. While I was getting ready, he waited for me in the living room, after which we left the house together. There was nothing unusual about that. At least that's what I thought. 3 weeks later, Ben casually mentioned that he met my mom in the living room. Of course, I replied that I was completely alone in the house that night. However, Ben continued to insist otherwise. Allegedly he had seen her and even began to describe her. She was standing next to the piano in a white nightgown, and when I said hello to her, she just walked away silently. That's where I got scared out of my mind. I was really scared.